Another quick option I wanted to just show you is that we could actually, let's do a new layer. If you just want to do simply a new blank layer, you can just click on right here, and that'll create you a blank layer. Other options, you can, click here, say new layer, and you have a new blank layer. And then one other way, of course, to do it is layer, new layer. So in Photoshop, usually there's like at least 3 different ways to do everything for the most part. So I'm going to just do it there. I have my new blank layer right here. And what I want to put into it is, I'm going to go ahead and dump a color. Let's just first start off with a nice intense red. Remember, these colors here are going to tell you basically if how this is going to look for printing. With the little exclamation point, usually that means that that's going to be a hard color for your printer to try to match. And so when you see that, you can watch here. Let me move it down. You can see these reds it can easily produce, but of these high intense reds, the printer's probably not going to be able to hit it. That's true unless you have a really high-end printer, or if you have a monitor that's color corrected for your printer. And so let's just go here so it's a safe color. We'll hit OK. Let me go ahead and have my paint bucket selected. I'm going to hide the bottom, just dump in the red there. I'm going to bring the bottom back. You're saying, where's the bottom? Remember these layer styles here we can play with. Let's go through a few of them. Here's darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, lighten, screen. These are all photography terms. Color dodge, color dodge and burn. If you take a photograph and there's an area that's too light, you apply a color burn on it. I think it is. Let me check real fast. Let me make sure I'm telling you the right thing. Dodge is to make it lighter, and burn is to make it darker in these areas. We could do that here in this image too. Let's just select burn. Let's go to the bottom, and we could go in and darken in an area. You can see how that is getting darker. And this is a great way of creating original sketches and things and then colorizing them. This is what your graphic novels and stuff, this is how they basically have an artist that does a sketch, and then of course there's a person that comes back in and photoshops it in, fills it in. For the most part they use Photoshop for that. And so there we made that area a little darker. Let me show you here the burn tool. The burn tool is going to make it darker in whatever area you're hitting. Of course, I mean it's a brush tool, so we can always make it larger by hitting the bracket, up bracket, and then down bracket, right? Make it super tiny, or we can right click and hopefully right click and make it larger and smaller. Guess that's not going to happen. Okay. For some reason that's not going right now, but anyway, nevertheless. And so let me show you the difference there. And the dodge tool, this is going to make areas lighter. I'm going to make that a larger brush, and let's put some highlights in spots here and there. Let's put some highlights, and that's a little too much. It's a little strong. Let's go back. I'm going to take all those highlights off, make a little bit smaller brush, and let's just hit a little highlight. I'm going to go back. I don't like that this is undo. I'm just hitting on the Macintosh. I'm hitting Option Apple Z. Option or Command Z will back you out. Here, let's go to the dodge. I'll click on that. Histories, of course, is keeping track of everything you were doing. If you hit Control Z on the Microsoft and then Command Z or the Apple button and Z on the Mac, it backs you out one step. And then if you hit with Option Z, you can see it backs you all the way out there. And so let's go back to the top there. Of course, that's happening under the edit thing. Undo state and step backward and step forward is basically what's happening. But let's take off that thing, and I'm just going to hit a little highlight right here. Hit a little highlight there. A little highlight here. Could maybe put some kind of weird glow in his eyes. Anyway, you have to be careful about using it, of course. Sometimes it's better to use it in some areas than others, but we'll back that out. Okay. But yeah, the dodge and burn tool. The dodge is going to make the area lighter, and then burn. Of course, you can adjust your options up here to get exactly the way you want it. You can take down the exposure, whatever it is that you want. But yeah, so here we have a solid color. Remember, we also can do this. Let me do a new blank layer. And let's go ahead and do the gradient tool, which is under the paint bucket. Here's gradient. And there's a pinky tone, I guess. Let's see. I guess that's kind of acidy. We'll just go with that. No worries. We'll pull that out. And then let's do the same thing. Let's drop these on top here. Give it kind of a rainbow effect. Some of them you're not going to see as much because of the way that they apply to the top there. Let's go exclusion. So you can see you have all these options. Like you go through, after a while you start to learn what the different ones do and which the ones you kind of like more than others. But it's a nice little effect. That's actually, I kind of would like to do, let's hide this one. Well, let's see what it looks like with both of these on. Let's go to overlay. So you can see there, by putting the red in there, it's going to amplify, those warm tones just a bit. So you have a lot of options you can do. We can tweak things by adding another little fill layers here. We can go up and set the white and black points with the levels. Increase the darks. And we can decrease or amplify the white areas too. We'll crank that up. I think that's kind of neat. You can keep going with these. We can go. We can play with the hue saturation. Now, when you do these fill layers, what's nice is it's affecting everything underneath it. So if you have stuff on top that you don't want affected, or if you want to pull it to a different level, you can. I'll show you that in a second. But here, we can pull the hue from one side to the other. If you want to do that Andy Warhol thing where you have a bunch of multiples where each one's a little different color, you have that option. We can take the saturation down, which means it grays out the color or desaturates the color, lessens the color, or amplifies the color greatly. We can lighten it. We can darken it. So we have those options. I'm going to hit cancel on that. Let me do, we can invert everything underneath, of course, like I showed you this before, so we'll hide that so you can see. Sometimes you get a lot of these, options going, these fill layers. Probably another neat one to mess around with is the curves. This is adjusting the shadows and highlights. So we can crank the shadows down, amplify the highlights there, almost burn it out like if you want, or take it all the way down the other way. And so that's just, we have multiple anchor points here that we can pull things up, and we can pull things up the other way, and all it's going to affect. These are the tools that you're going to use also when you color correct photograph. You can adjust highlights and shadows and things. Let me just hit OK on that. And one nice thing you can do is group all these together. And by grouping these together, what you can do is there's a couple ways you can do it. One, if you highlight the three layers or link them, you can go down and just simply hit create new group project, and whoops, this is the long kind of way of doing it, and then pull those into there. So now we have them in that one group, and we can name that group, adjustment layer or layers. And that way we can just keep things organized. We can close that off. We can hide it. In that way, you can see, what basically is happening with those three adjustment layers. Another way to group is, let's go back here, and let's go back one more, curve layer. There you go. What we can do is, what I was going to show you, we can highlight the three, and you can also go up here to layer, group layers, which is Control G, and that will simply group all those together into one grouping right there. You can see they're all right there, and let's go ahead and call that again adjustment layer, plural. Okay, and so this is a great way of doing it in that when you use these fill layers and these adjustment layers, it's doing it in a non-destructive way, meaning that if you took a great photograph and you wanted to alter some of the adjustments, have maybe some curves or levels changes in that, instead of doing it on the individual layer, which you can do, here, let me hide these adjustment layers here. I'm going to select the background there of the gas mask guy, and we go to image, and we can apply the adjustments. Here we can do curves. I'll select curves, and we can apply the curves to it. Amplify the shadows and increase the highlights there. Pull them down, those anchor points, wherever you think they're best. Remember also, you can always hit the option on the Mac or the Alt button, and it will change cancel to reset. And let's reset those points. I'm just going to pull in a little bit of shadow. You can pull in some shadow like that and hit OK. But what happens there is that locks it into the layer. And so if you were to save this file now, you could never get this back to this state, basically here, what it was originally, because you've altered it. Don't say destroyed, but you've made a change in which you can't undo. Photoshop is not like Microsoft. Well, let's just say this. Once you save it, whatever those changes, these history states are disappear. And so even though right now we can go back, all the way to when I was messing around with the, burn and dodge tool, what happens is when you save the file, all those history states go away. It's not keeping that in the information. And so we won't ever be able to go back to a certain point. So the thing is, you need to save often. Save it in different versions. Let's go back. So here's that curve adjustment that I applied there, but as it's affecting that layer, or it's on that layer, and we can't alter that after we've saved it. What's the better thing to do is go back. Don't apply it to the layer itself, but apply it in a grouping above it. And so here we have those curves and invert and the levels there. We can pull the colors back on there so we can see it. And that's a better way of doing it. It just preserves your image better. So in case you ever wanted to go back and alter that original in some way, you haven't destroyed it, or you haven't altered it in a way that you can't get it back to the original state. So that's one thing to be aware of in Photoshop. Another thing, as I was saying, is save often. What I usually do is save versions, like say you could do a version that was a red one and call it gas mask 1, or gas mask 2, with gas mask 2 applying these green layers. Or if you wanted to be more specific, you can what's nice in the Mac OS is that you can really do long titles. You could say gas mask version green with adjustment layers, or you could really be specific in the way you've titled your things. This is also what a lot of artists do when they are sending things out to print. Usually they do all the changes that they want in Photoshop, and then what they'll do is they'll save that file, and then they'll duplicate the file, and then apply the unsharp mask, and then send that file as final unsharp mask or sharpened image to whoever it needs to, or wherever it's going to go to print. And so those are just things you do as an artist, or as a graphic designer, or a photographer, or whatever it is, somebody who's going to do a lot of printed images from Photoshop, so that what's going on, because you don't want to guess, did I unsharp mask this image? And so it's just things that you want to be aware of as you move along and start experimenting more with Photoshop. You need to make sure that you know what you've experimented with, what you've changed, what you've altered. But another thing, let me show you with just the gradient. We can apply different types of gradients. Let me do a new blank empty layer, and what we'll pull that underneath the adjustment layers. And whoop, I pulled it into. Let's get it out. Let's get that out. Okay, let's close that, and let's pull it underneath. Or probably the easiest thing would be put the adjustment layers above it. And so here we have the adjustment layers. Here we have this new blank empty layer. And what I'm going to do here on the gradients, what I want to do is let's select, let's do kind of a red. Well, let's do opposite of what I'm doing. Here's a purple colors. Remember with these gradients too, you can change them and alter them a little bit on here. So you can pull out different colors and such. And so in Photoshop, you always have options to change everything. Solid, we can add more noise to it, so there's more of these lines. And so let's go ahead and pull that out and see what happened here. And so we have one with a lot of these linear elements, or these line elements going on there. And right now we can't see through it because we don't have a layer style. So let's go ahead and click on a couple of these. Here's darken, multiply, color burn, so it's the same thing like I've showed you already. Let's just do overlay, I like that. The color dodge is nice. Uh, but remember, we can take these off and apply these as we like them. It's your own choice. What do you think is most successful? And let me just also show you how I pulled out that gradient thing. If you didn't notice, you just click simply on the thing there, and we can and you'll get this palette that pops out, and you can select that and change it with more noise. Let's do increase that. So we have different ones. Let me also show you. Let's hide that. Let's also go through these different ones. Here, this is the linear one, I believe, is what it's called. Let me. So that's a linear gradient. Let's see. We'll go the opposite direction. And see what this looks like. We'll just play with these a little bit and see what's going on. Let's see. We'll go overlay on that. Let's undo that. And what we can do is I just hit Option Delete there, and that'll delete out everything that's inside the layer. So just Option Delete, just deletes it out. Let me get the this is the radial gradient here. Let's pull out a little radial gradient. You can see it creates like that circle right there, right? Let's do a different color. I'm not grooving that. I'm not grooving that color that much. So let's go ahead and choose a different gradient. Let's just do that one. Okay, and the next one. This is the angled one, angle gradient. So we can do a little angle gradient. So it's hide so you can see what's going on. Kind of gives it like a little poke out there. And this one is the horizontal reflective gradient. Does it on two sides. We'll show you the difference between this one and this one. They look kind of similar on this, but a little bit different. And then the star one, or diamond, I think it's called diamond gradient. So you have those options to apply that to the layers underneath. Sometimes the patterning and stuff can be quite interesting. Sometimes if you want to create kind of a halo effect, we can hit Option Delete to delete out everything inside there. We go to the circle, or radial gradient as it's called properly. Maybe pull that out, so you can get kind of that halo aura kind of effect as well. But those are some options you have using the layer style effects for your design and for your compositions. Remember, group your items together is a good way of doing it, and leaving your doing it in fill layers so that you don't destroy the original image.